Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Funny how that works. I was getting ready to shoot 2 videos. Got an email at the last second, which I immediately recognized as something I got to shoot a video about. Otherwise, I'm going to get buried in emails from people saying, Steve, have you seen this? Have you seen this? Have you seen this? I'll still get those, but I won't get as many. But Nate sent this, thanks a lot. Video shows DUI arrest of Indiana man driving a Power Wheels Jeep. We've heard these stories about the crazy things people can get arrested on while allegedly drunk. From NBC Chicago, but the story's out of Indiana. The Indiana man recently learned a harsh lesson when police arrested him for allegedly driving under the influence while using a kid's Power Wheels Jeep. Indiana State Police released video of the encounter last month showing what happened when a state trooper spotted a man driving a battery-powered Power Wheels Jeep near the southern Indiana city of Vincennes. The man was identified as a 51-year-old. He failed several sobriety tests, including the fact that he was simply driving a Power Wheels Jeep on the road, and was taken to a local hospital for blood tests. And that was a joke, by the way. Once at the hospital, the shocked man learned he was being arrested, and he said, "Are you kidding me?" Now, I've seen hundreds of videos of arrests, and people always ask, "Are you kidding me?" I've never once seen a police officer go, "Yeah, I'm just kidding you." No, they're not kidding. When the cuffs come out, you're getting arrested. While in the trooper's patrol car, he explained he'd been riding the Power Wheels Jeep for the past 9 months, that no one had taken him to jail yet. You may even get famous for that because no one else has done it, he said. He told the trooper. You may even get famous. He was charged with operating a vehicle with a prior conviction, which is a felony, and has since been released. So what you need to know, and that's the entire story, what you need to know is that the laws involving drunk driving vary wildly from state to state. They've gotten harsher over the years, and some of the statutes have actually gotten more complicated over the years. So I'm going to go with the statute from Michigan because that's what I'm most familiar with. I've actually handled quite a few drunk driving cases, not recently, but I used to do quite a few when I was a younger attorney. And the Michigan Motor Vehicle Code is MCL 257 in the blue books behind me. There you'll find all the definitions involving driving and cars and so on. And then also the drunk driving statute at MCL 257 625, operating motor vehicle while intoxicated. And then it goes into the definitions and a bunch of other things you cannot do. So it starts with, and this is just the basic, a person, whether licensed or not, shall not operate a vehicle on a highway or other place open to the general public or generally accessible to motor vehicles, including an area designated for the parking of vehicles within this state if the person is operating while intoxicated. So you got to know a bunch of definitions then, including what intoxicated is, and they talk about all different standards. If you blow a blood alcohol content of this, you're this, you're this, and so on and so forth. Impaired, intoxicated, et cetera, et cetera. The real question, though, becomes what is a motor vehicle for the purposes of this code? And then what is a vehicle? Because sometimes the statute says you cannot operate a vehicle. Sometimes it says you cannot operate a motor vehicle. So a vehicle at 257.79 says a vehicle means every device in, upon, or by which any person or property is or may be transported or drawn upon a highway, except devices exclusively moved by human power or used exclusively upon stationary rails or tracks. So trains are not vehicles under the statute. Neither are the old school skateboards. You stand on it with one foot, you push it with the other. That's pure human power. So that is not a vehicle under the statute. Now, motor vehicle, so Section 33 says motor vehicle means every vehicle that is self-propelled. And then it says a few things that are not included, such as a power-driven mobility device. So, a motorized wheelchair, that kind of thing. But it does appear that the Power Wheels toy would qualify as a motor vehicle because it is, in fact, a vehicle that is self-propelled. Okay? It's self-propelled. And then remember that you cannot operate that, whether licensed or not, on a highway or other place open to the general public or generally accessible to motor vehicles within the state if the person is operating it while intoxicated. So if this had happened in Michigan, these allegations would stand up. I suspect that Indiana has very, very similar statutes on its books. We've heard stories about people getting pulled over driving to the store on a riding lawnmower. And I've actually seen somebody try to make the argument and say, well, it's not a car, I'm not drunk driving. And the officers go, yeah, it doesn't say car. It just says motor vehicle. Is it self-propelled? Yes, your riding mower is self-propelled. You're operating that, right? Well, you shall not operate a vehicle on a highway or other place if you're operating while intoxicated. That's simple. That's simple. So you often see sometimes the oddball situations where somebody is in a buggy being pulled by a horse. And now that is a vehicle that is self-propelled because the horse and buggy is propelling it, not you with your own human power. I've actually seen it before where they say, well, a horse is self-propelled because you ain't putting your feet down on the ground next to it doing this, right? If it was a really small pony, you probably could, but the pony be adding some power as well. So it's going to vary from state to state, and you will often see when a law gets passed like this, because this law got updated. I'm going to sound like the old guy here. When I first became an attorney, was right around the time they started updating a lot of the drunk driving statutes in Michigan and in other states. And they started laying out all these different standards and started defining these things really, really well. And you had to learn all this new stuff. And anytime a statute comes out that's been heavily modified like that or new from scratch, there's going to be litigation on it because somebody's going to get pulled over with a horse and buggy, right? And they're going to want to try to argue that it's not a motor vehicle. It's not a motor vehicle. But a motor vehicle is defined simply as one that is self-propelled. It doesn't say it's got to have a motor in it. And that's one of the things that I encounter a lot. And I think a lot of lawyers take this for granted, but a lot of non-lawyers find it strange. And they'll say, let me get this straight. You have a thing that's a vehicle, right? You have a vehicle. And then you've got a motor vehicle. And the distinction making a motor vehicle is not the fact that it has a motor on it, despite the fact that that's the only difference between the two phrases. Vehicle, motor vehicle. You would think the motor vehicle would have a motor. Isn't that how words work? Well, yes and no, because in statutes, when there's a law on the books and there's a law, and the law has a bunch of words in it and says these things are illegal, these things are not, these things are lawful, whatever they might say, and you look at it, you go, okay, there's a phrase in there, motor vehicle. What does that mean? Now, if it's not defined in the statute, then you got to go look to case law or dictionaries, but important phrases will be defined. And so they define motor vehicle as every vehicle that is self-propelled. If it's self-propelled, it doesn't matter whether it's self-propelled by a motor or otherwise. And now, I suppose they could have just said, you shall not operate a self-propelled vehicle while intoxicated. But most people go, what? Really? That's what the law says? And so, the bulk of what's going to happen, the bulk of the cases are going to be people behind the wheels of regular cars. Not Power Wheels Jeeps, but regular cars. And so the vast majority of the motor vehicles out there are going to be, in these situations, automobiles. Cars, trucks, SUVs, what have you, right? But they broaden it to say it's every vehicle that is self-propelled. So obviously motorcycles fall into that also. And now they could have said a person shall not operate a widget and just insert some made-up word there. And then say a widget is defined as, and then list everything that is covered. But then you find yourself doing things like, well, would somebody ever drive a Power Wheels Jeep? Fine, we got to put that down. Would anybody ever drive an electric scooter drunk? Probably, put that down. Okay, would anybody, and so this definition is much simpler. Every vehicle that is self-propelled. So you're getting into a vehicle that powers itself, and you're drunk. Shouldn't do that. And the other thing I'd like to point out is it says that you should not do that on a highway or other place open to the general public or generally accessible to motor vehicles, including an area designated for the parking of vehicles. So let's start this backwards and point out parking lots. I've heard of people who said, Steve, I was drinking, I was in a parking lot behind the wheel of my car, and a cop rolled up and said, you, drunk driving, you're operating your vehicle in the parking lot. And they go, it's a private parking lot. It's not even a government-owned parking lot. Can they get me for that? Well, let's see now. Is it an area designated for the parking of vehicles and generally accessible to motor vehicles? Is it open to the general public? You know, it qualifies in a whole bunch of those. Yeah. Now, we've also heard people who pulled up their own driveway. Driving down the road, pull up their driveway, shut the car off, and the cop rolls up and goes, I saw you driving a second ago. And they go, no, it wasn't me. But, you know, they got you behind the wheel of the car. Well, you're in your own driveway, but of course that driveway is generally accessible to motor vehicles. And I did a video a couple of years ago, and we got a lot of discussion on it below the video, where in Florida, somebody was driving on a quote-unquote private road and got arrested for drunk driving or reckless driving. I forgot which of the two it was, but it doesn't matter in this situation because both of them in Florida, I believe, can happen on a road that is accessible to the public, even if the road itself is not public in that sense. And so a lot of people just assume there's these bright lines out there, that if I'm drunk driving on the road, cop can write me up. If I'm drunk driving in a field next to the road, he can't. As a tow truck driver, I got to see a lot of crazy stuff. And so understand that these things are written very broadly. The legislature wants to discourage people from drinking and driving any place that they could hurt somebody else. So if you're in a parking lot drunk driving and other people are parking their cars there or walking to and from their cars in that parking lot, presumably you are a menace to their safety if you're drunk. So that's the point. But here, the guy is allegedly driving a Power Wheels Jeep on the road while intoxicated. That is going to be a motor vehicle in most states, and operating it while impaired or intoxicated will be against the law. And it sounds like he may have had some trouble in the past. And so if this is not his first offense, as you know, a lot of times these offenses stack up exponentially, as they say. So, Nate, thanks for sending it. But the man was arrested in Indiana while driving a Power Wheels Jeep down the side of the road, presumably, they say, while intoxicated. From NBC Chicago, questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Virtue is its own reward.